그렇게 느껴지고 저는 그 세계에 벌어진 부분이 있다고 생각을 해요. 그런데 그 부분을 제가 계속 응시하고 고개를 돌리지 않으려고 애를 쓰기 때문에 그 지점에서 불편함이라는 게 발생하는 게 아닐까 하고 생각합니다. 네. 제 꿈이라고 하면 조금 거창하지만 저는 계속 시를 쓰는 게 꿈입니다. 계속해서 자기 갱신을 하면서 써나가는 것. 네.
Held its first debate over the weekend.
The economy is expected to expand 2.5% this year.
Boosting Korea's ties with its global partners on the sidelines of the status UN summit. A massive drone attack on Ukraine overnight on Monday and Tuesday.
Arirang.
In our headlines on this Tuesday, July 1st, here in South Korea. Exports expand in June to reach a fresh record of almost $60 billion for the month, up over 4% on year, amid steady shipments to markets in Europe and in the Middle East. Meanwhile, over in Washington, the Trump administration will sit down to set the tariff rates for countries that have yet to approach trade talks with the U.S. in, quote, good faith. And back on the local front, President Lee Jae-myung calls for respect for the parliament from the cabinet, pointing out that National Assembly members are elected representatives of the people, while cabinet members are appointed officials. We start on the trade front, as findings for the month of June show exports hitting an all-time high for the month, driven by cars and chips. Our correspondent Park Jun-han reports.
Exports in June reached an all-time high of $59.8 billion, up 4.3% from a year earlier, according to data released on Tuesday by the Ministry of Trade, Industry, and Energy. Imports rose 3.3% to $50.72 billion, resulting in a trade surplus of $9.08 billion. Among the country's 15 major export items, 6 showed growth. Notably, semiconductors fueled this, marking a historic $15 billion in June, up 11.6%, and continuing a 4-month upward trend. This helped overseas shipments of semiconductors reach $73.3 billion for the first half of 2025, the highest ever performance over that period.
Previously, market demand for semiconductors was driven by mobile devices, but it has now shifted to AI and data centers. Strong memory sales, particularly high bandwidth memory, and a surge in AI data center investment are the fundamental drivers behind the recent growth in semiconductor exports.
Automobile shipments also hit an all-time high for June at $6.3 billion, marking a 2.3% increase from a year earlier. Robust deliveries were driven by high EU demand for electric vehicles and a whopping 67.9% surge in used car exports, to $670 million. By region, June exports saw growth in 7 of its 9 major trading regions, excluding the United States and China. Although exports to the United States and China saw a slight decrease of 0.5% and 2.7% respectively, exports to regions such as the European Union and the Middle East saw a significant increase of over at least 14%. The economic experts stated that the drop in exports to the United States and China reflects a shift in the global trading order.
The drop in exports after Trump's tariff hikes is a major setback, especially since exports were expected to rise. South Korea exports intermediate goods to China, which China then ships as final products to the U.S. So tariffs on China hit us too. As existing markets shrink, we naturally look for new ones, leading to a shift in the trading order, with more exports heading outside the U.S. and China.
In the meantime, Trade Minister An Deok-keun said the government plans to respond proactively to the immediate challenges in the Korea-U.S. negotiations and will soon prepare export support measures such as trade financing and the identification of alternative markets to minimize the negative impact on industries. Park Junan, Arirang News.
And the Trump administration will sit down to set tariff rates for countries that have yet to approach trade talks with the U.S. in, quote, good faith. Our Kim Bo-kyung has the latest.
With the July 9th tariff pause deadline approaching, U.S. President Donald Trump is reportedly planning meetings with his trade team this week to set tariff rates for individual countries. This, according to White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt during a briefing on Monday.
He is going to set the rates for many of these countries if they don't come to the table to negotiate in good faith, and he is meeting with his trade team this week to do that.
This echoes Director of the National Economic Council, Kevin Hassett, who said in an interview that there will be a marathon meeting as soon as the One Big Beautiful Bill Act passes before Independence Day on the 4th of July. While saying Trump will review tariff plans one country at a time, he added that the number of deals in hand is in the double digits, with a framework for negotiations in place similar to what was used to strike a deal with the UK last month. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent also warned countries to cooperate during an interview with Bloomberg TV. Though there are countries that are negotiating in good faith with the U.S., he said, they should be aware that the tariffs could spring back to April 2nd levels if the deal does not get across the line. Warnings have also been directed at specific countries. Trump, in a post of Truth Social, said Washington would be sending Tokyo a letter while threatening to impose higher tariffs on Japanese exports to the U.S. over Japan's unwillingness to buy American-grown rice, despite a massive rice shortage. Specific details of what the letter might contain have not been disclosed. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
Now, as mentioned earlier, the deadline for country-specific U.S. tariffs is fast approaching. That being said, my colleague Kim Do-yeon spoke to a number of scholars here for their thoughts on effective South Korean trade strategy. Do take a listen.
The stakes couldn't be higher as South Korea's heavy dependence on exports, especially to the United States, leaves its core industries vulnerable. With the July 8th deadline fast approaching, Seoul is racing to secure a deal that shields its automakers and semiconductor producers from hefty new tariffs.
I believe Korea needs to emphasize that its economic growth leads to more factories and jobs being created in the United States, and use that to steer negotiations in a direction that benefits both countries.
Recent moves by Hyundai Motor Group underscore that point, with the company pledging over $21 billion in investments across the U.S. over the next 3 years. The move perhaps testifies to experts' claims that autos are the most exposed. Under Section 232 of the U.S. Trade Expansion Act, Washington currently slaps a 25% tariff on imported vehicles and auto parts, a duty both Korea and Japan have been pushing to reduce.
Among all the tariffs Korea faces from the U.S. right now, the most critical issue is the auto sector. If this isn't resolved, we're likely to see significant damage, not just for finished cars, but also for parts, steel, and aluminum, since all these tariffs are heavily concentrated on automobiles.
Without a breakthrough, Korea's automakers and a web of suppliers could suffer severe losses. Some experts suggest that ramping up local manufacturing in the U.S. may be the most immediate way to cushion the blow.
By using production facilities over there, we can effectively offset tariffs on parts as well. So at this point, I think expanding and maximizing manufacturing operations in the U.S., rather than producing everything domestically, is actually the best alternative we have.
But they caution this could mean fewer jobs and contracts for Korea's own factories and parts makers. That's why experts say tariffs will ultimately need to be tackled at the negotiating table. They point out that South Korea's shipbuilding capacity could serve as leverage, while even adjustments to defense cost-sharing might come into play. Kim Do-hyun, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, back in the U.S., Wall Street rallied this past Monday, bolstered by widespread belief that the Trump administration will indeed reach tariff deals ahead of next week's deadline. The tech-heavy Nasdaq hit a new high after gaining over 96 points to close trade at 20,369.7. Similarly, the S&P 500 reached a new record after rising over 31 points to end its session on Monday at above 6,204. The overall market optimism follows Canada's removal of a tax targeting American tech firms that had earlier prompted U.S. President Donald Trump to call off bilateral trade talks. Those talks are now set to resume. President Lee Jae-myung has called for respect for the parliament from the cabinet, pointing out that National Assembly members are elected representatives of the people, while cabinet members are appointed officials. Our top office correspondent Yoon Jung-min covers his remarks.
국회는 국민으로부터 직접 권력을 위임받은 기관이어서 우리 국무위원들께서 국회에 가시면 그 직접 선출된 권력에 대해서 존중감을 가져주시면 좋겠어요. 국가의 기본적 질서에 관한 문제니까.
President Lee Jae-myung began Tuesday's cabinet meeting by noting that all power comes from the people and officials elected by the people come before those who were appointed. He pointed out that there seems to be a misunderstanding with Parliament and urged the cabinet to respect the assembly. Present at the meeting were some of the cabinet members from the former Yoon Suk-yeol administration. He went on to pay attention to the livelihoods of the people, particularly the vulnerable, with the nation in the middle of the summer rainy season.
이게 지금 혹서기가 도래하면 어쨌든 또 뭐 쪽방이니 뭐 이런 노인 취약계층들이 또 위기를 겪습니다. 또 각별히 관심 갖도록 잘 관리해 주시기 부탁드립니다.
He also turned to another matter affecting the lives of Koreans, real estate. He said the stock and financial markets have been recently normalized and began to serve as investment options other than the property market, pointing to a tendency in Korea where speculation in real estate often leads to housing market instability. Last week, the nation's financial watchdog announced strict measures to tighten household lending to curb soaring home prices in the capital. Discussions on Tuesday included how to use some of the land left fallow in the border area of Gyeonggi-do province following the relocation of the U.S. military sites to Pyeongtaek.
President Lee instructed the Defense Ministry to proactively review and report measures to deal with the issues regarding the land returned by the U.S. forces Korea in northern Gyeonggi-do province.
Among the items endorsed at the cabinet meeting was an agreement to establish a free trade zone between South Korea and Ecuador aimed at expanding bilateral trade and investment. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, North Korean state media has shared footage of its leader Kim Jong-un honoring the sacrifice of his soldiers who are believed to have been killed on the battlefield in Russia's war against Ukraine. Kim Jong-sil reports.
In a rare public display, North Korean state media aired images of its troops deployed to Russia's Kursk region. Marking the first anniversary of a new military pact with Moscow, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un watched the performance in Pyongyang, sitting with his daughter Chue, as Russia's culture minister Olga Lyubimova sat at the table next to him. Large screens showed photos of North Korean soldiers in combat, as well as images of Kim posing before flag-draped coffins, scenes never before shown to the public. After a Russian ensemble performed, North Korean artists offered songs apparently dedicated to fallen soldiers, and Kim stood during the tribute song. State cameras captured audience members wiping away tears as Kim was seen kneeling by the coffins, his hands resting on the flags covering them. State media also revealed, for the first time, Kim's handwritten order authorizing the Kursk offensive. Analysts say Pyongyang is using the ceremony to honor the fallen, rally public support, and reinforce its growing alliance with Moscow. Officials in Seoul believe the display may also be intended to sustain morale ahead of possible additional deployments and to remind Russia that these sacrifices come with the expectation of compensation. Observers also noted the deliberate staging of Kim's daughter, who has appeared more frequently at Russia-related events since she visited the Russian embassy in May, as part of efforts to present her as a potential successor. Kim Jong-sil, Arirang News.
And US President Donald Trump may meet with North Korea's Kim Jong-un at Panmunjom this autumn. Now, this is according to Victor Cha, the Korean chair at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, during an online seminar back in June on the impact of US attacks against Iran's nuclear sites on North Korea. Cha, a former member of the U.S. National Security Council, suggested that Mr. Trump's travel to South Korea to attend the APEC summit scheduled from October 31st to November 1st might lead to a fourth meeting with the North Korean leader following their last encounter at the Korean border back in 2019. Cha also warned that the recent U.S. strikes against Iran may have bolstered North Korea's belief that its nuclear weapons are the only deterrent against such assaults. In the Middle East, dozens of lives were lost in Gaza following Israeli air assaults this past Monday. Pyongyang reports.
On Monday, as reported by AP News, Israeli forces left at least 74 people dead in Gaza. The deadliest attack was carried out by airstrikes on a beachfront cafe that was filled with women and children. It was one of the few places during the war where civilians could charge their phones and get internet access.
An F-16 missile, a war missile, military aircraft, not a drone or a bomb or a shell from a boat. The F-16 shook the place. It struck this place, as you can see. Pools of blood, piles of martyrs. I mean, if you had seen the scene from the beginning, there were piles of martyrs.
Faraz Awad, a Gaza Health Ministry official, said at least 30 were killed and dozens injured in the cafe strike. Local medical officials reported 15 more deaths on a Gaza City street, 6 in a separate building strike, 11 civilians shot while searching for food, and 10 killed at a UN aid warehouse. While Israel maintains it only targets militants, Gaza's health ministry reports that more than 56,000 Palestinians, many of them civilians, have been killed since the war began. Meanwhile, unnamed U.S. officials confirmed that U.S. President Donald Trump will host Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at the White House next Monday. The meeting comes as Trump intensifies efforts to broker a ceasefire in Gaza. White House Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt, during a briefing on Monday, reaffirmed the administration's commitment to ending the conflict.
I also know that this administration is in constant communication with Israeli leadership, and the president himself speaks frequently, as you know, to Prime Minister Netanyahu. But this has been a priority for the president since he took office, to end this brutal war in Gaza.
Netanyahu's upcoming visit comes as the U.S., after striking Iranian nuclear sites and brokering a ceasefire between Israel and Iran, shifts focus to ending the Israel-Hamas conflict. Pyongyang, Arirang News.
And the U.S. leader has signed an executive order lifting sanctions against Syria that were imposed over time starting back in the year 2004. They included export controls on certain goods and restrictions on foreign assistance to Syria. However, sanctions against former Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad and his associates remain in place. The order takes effect from today, that is July 1st. In other news, AI data centers are major energy consumers, but these centers also stand to ultimately share solutions for sustainable energy consumption. Our Jongun covers this paradox.
A war between humans and AI. Science fiction movies address various approaches, but the massive amount of electricity AI consumes is a real issue. Humanity blocks the sun to cut off AI's power supply. Then, in retaliation, AI starts using humans as their power source, like batteries. A single question asked of ChatGPT-4 uses enough electricity to power a 10-watt LED bulb for 3 minutes. Currently, data centers for AI account for 1.5% of the world's total electricity consumption. On this path, data centers will match the annual electricity consumption of all of Japan by 2030. On top of the massive energy consumption, cooling the GPU chips of the data centers requires hundreds of thousands of tons of water, which also has negative impacts on the environment.
What I'm most worried about is that we're building an enormous infrastructure for artificial intelligence that is extremely energy and water intensive without looking at the very real downsides in terms of the climate impacts.
The Davos Forum published a report in January of this year titled Artificial Intelligence's Energy Paradox. It projected that AI's electricity consumption will increase by an average of 50% annually from 2023 to 2030. Google has pledged to nearly eliminate carbon emissions by 2030, but since 2019, its emissions have increased by 50%. Microsoft, too, is going in the opposite direction of its original reduction goals.
The carbon neutrality plans of global leaders in AI competition, like Microsoft and Google, have derailed due to the growing competition of generative AI.
The paradox is that AI also has the potential to be a problem solver for the climate crisis by analyzing energy usage patterns to improve efficiency or optimizing traffic flows to reduce carbon emissions. Ultimately, if AI can improve its cognitive capabilities to operate in an environmentally friendly way, it could become an opportunity for humanity. Jongun, Arirang News.
Those of you here in the capital city endured the first tropical night of the season this past evening, following the announcement of a heatwave advisory for Seoul back on Monday. Our Isingjae covers the heat here and elsewhere.
Seoul saw the season's first heat wave advisory being issued on Monday, just a day after it experienced its first tropical night of the summer. A heat advisory is issued when the day's highest perceived temperature is expected to stay at 33 degrees Celsius or above for 2 or more days. However, the capital's heat wave advisory came 11 days later than last year. Still, the sweltering heat is expected to remain not just in Seoul, but nationwide.
As the hot and humid North Pacific high-pressure area covers our country, a large amount of hot and humid water vapor is flowing in along its edge.
The Korea Meteorological Administration also issued heat wave warnings for around 20 regions nationwide, including Daegu, Gwangju, Central Busan, and Eastern Jeju Island. A heat wave warning is issued when the highest perceived temperature is expected to reach 35 degrees or higher for 2 or more straight days, or when major damage is expected from the heat. Southern regions like Ulchin, Gyeongsangbuk-do Province, Haenam, Jeollanam-do Province, and Jeju Island experienced the hottest June since the KMA began compiling records. The intense heat also led to the death of a woman in her 60s who had been working in a field in Jinju, Gyeongsangnam-do Province. She was found unresponsive on Sunday afternoon, with police saying they believe she died of heat stroke. The KMA advises vulnerable groups, including the elderly and children, to take extra care to stay hydrated and limit outdoor activities. 이승재, Arirang News.
This is The World Now, bringing you the latest stories from around the globe. Western Türkiye is battling massive wildfires driven by extreme heat and strong winds, forcing tens of thousands of people to evacuate from 5 regions across the country. Wildfires in Izmir province are entering their 3rd day, fueled by scorching temperatures and winds reaching 40 to 50 kilometers per hour. The province's airport was briefly closed and over 50,000 residents from 41 settlements have been evacuated. More than 1,000 personnel are involved in firefighting efforts. However, dense smoke and strong winds are hampering aerial extinguishing efforts. Turkey's forestry minister warned that the situation may worsen without a drop in temperature and wind speeds. Emergency services remain on alert, with resources being shifted to vulnerable coastal areas. The blazes form a part of a wider Western Europe heat wave, with temperatures across the region running 5 to 10 degrees Celsius above seasonal norms. Denmark's parliament has approved extending its compulsory conscription to women starting July 1st, placing them on equal footing with men in the national draft lottery. Until now, only male citizens were subject to mandatory service, whereas women could join voluntarily. The reform brings forward plans originally set for 2027 due to security concerns amid Russian aggression and NATO defense commitments. Under the new policy, all women turning 18 after June 30th will enter the draft pool of the lottery system alongside men. Denmark plans to increase its annual number of conscripts from 4,700 to 6,500 by 2033. Service duration is also being extended from 4 to 11 months. In the U.S., the annual T-Rex World Championship races were held at Emerald Downs Racecourse in Washington state on Sunday, where more than 300 people competed dressed as Tyrannosaurus Rex dinosaurs. The championship includes the men's, women's, and children's races. Some participants also parachuted onto the tracks while dressed as dinos. The races will be shown in full on ESPN2 later this summer. The event began in 2017 as a team-building activity for a pest control company. Choi Ji-hee, Arirang News.
It's hot day and night across the country. Seoul has had tropical nights for 2 straight days, and heatwave warnings are continuing. Under heatwave warnings and advisories, summer heat of over 35 degrees Celsius warmed up the whole country. The daytime temperature in Samcheok and Gyeongju rose as high as 36 degrees during the day. With steaming conditions, strong UV rays are inevitable. High levels of ultraviolet rays will cover the skies around the country. Around the eastern and southern parts of the country, very high levels of UV rays will continue tomorrow afternoon. Tomorrow morning will be even hotter than today at around 24 to 26 degrees. Highs move up to 31 degrees in Seoul, Chuncheon, Busan, and Jeju. There's no rain forecast for the time being. Please take good care of your health. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
Those are the headlines at this hour here in South Korea. As always, thank you for watching.
도시는 세계와 연결되어 문화를 창조했고 새로운 것을 받아들였다.
자유,
융합,
국제성,
다양성, 포용,
개발.
과거와 현재, 미래가 어우르는 경주에서 신라의 정신과 에이펙 2025를 만납니다.
The new South Korean administration is reportedly opting for strategic patience with regard to its diplomatic engagements as it shapes a foreign policy based on pragmatism. With more press perspective today. Hello and welcome to Press Perspective for this Tuesday, July 1st, here in Seoul. I'm Min Sun-hee. Today we touch upon the Lee Jae-myung administration's approach to diplomacy amid the current climate of geopolitics. For more on this, I have Fabian Kretschmer with German news agency DPA here in the studio. Fabian, welcome back.
Nice to be in the studio.
I also have Professor Kim Jong-un at the Korea National Defense University live on the line. Professor Kim, it's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you for having me today.
We will start here in the studio. Fabian, let's begin with the gist of President Lee Jae-myung's pragmatic diplomacy and the shape that his foreign policy appears to be taking.
Yeah, so you already said it's a pragmatic approach. I think that's what Lee Jae-myung is also emphasizing. And the rationale behind is that he wants to weather the geopolitical storm. So one core of the foreign policy now is that South Korea doesn't want to be in a situation where it has to decide between the United States and China, but it wants to basically have good relationships with both. That means, enjoying business relationship with the US, but also enjoying security benefits from the US, and at the same time having business with China. Of course, that makes sense if you look at it because it's, good for South Korean interests. But I would say this foreign policy also has some possible weaknesses because we don't know how Trump will react to Lee Jae-myung's strategy. I mean, he has really emphasized that countries should not be free riding and, they have to somehow choose sides. So there might be pressure by the US. And in general, we also don't know how South Korea will approach Russia. I mean, that's something we actually don't know yet. And whether, for example, South Korean businesses will engage with Russia again, that could also lead to tensions with Europe. So it is actually quite a difficult geopolitical situation, and South Korea really wants to be very flexible and basically maximize its own interests.
Right. Professor Kim, keeping in mind what Fabian has just said, and speaking within your capacity, of course, as a scholar, how feasible is a pragmatic foreign policy, especially keeping in mind the current geopolitical environment?
Yes, I fully agree with the Fabian point of view, and also the new government approach, the new slogan, pragmatic diplomacy is not easy to achieve vision due to difficult violent environment situation like the U.S.-China strategic competition, North Korea-Russia military cooperation, and Trump administration new approach. So pragmatic diplomacy is not easy. But this is not a new term because a former President Lee Myung-bak, who was the CEO of the Hyundai Group, used this same term for different regions because he was a student protester during the 1960s against the Japanese presidential summit. At the time, he became the successful businessman, and he wanted to be more a pragmatic leader rather than a student protester ideology man. So at the time, he wanted to use pragmatic diplomacy for different regions. But anyway, Lee Jae-myung used this term for maximizing national interest. But already opposition party criticized this one as opportunism or something like that. So Fabian already pointed out this is a very difficult the situation. But at the same time, anyway, Lee Jae-myung want to use this term because in differentiation from the Yoon Suk-yeol government value alliance, the Biden administration emphasized on, but this was not the balancing between U.S. and China. So this is not easy. But anyway, Lee Jae-myung government to try to do something new for maximizing national interest.
Right. On the actual diplomatic front, Professor Kim, President Lee Jae-myung did not attend the NATO summit in the Netherlands last week, and instead he sent his top security aide. What do you suppose led to this decision?
At the time, everybody remember the Iranian situation and Israel war is not easy. So Japanese Prime Minister decided the same thing. But I don't think it's the best option. But anyway, this Lee Jae-myung government to try to do the best thing. And National Security Advisor Ri Sung-nak attended instead of the Lee Jae-myung government. But the problem is Republic of Korea is not Japan, not the same as meaning. So many countries already concerned about South Korea position between the U.S. and China, and it was a different position from the Biden-Yoon Suk-yeol government relation. So I think attending NATO is would have been best option. But anyway, at the time, Iranian situation, the German government choose what he best to do. So this is not easy decide. But anyway, this is a more pragmatic diplomatic position from now.
Right. And over in the Netherlands last week, Fabian, National Security Advisor Wee Sung-lak sat down with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, and they agreed to bolster defense initiatives. Could you tell us a bit more about the agreement made and their broader implications?
Yeah, they established a consultative body for defense industry cooperation, and I think that links a little bit to what was previously said, that it is a it's a flexible, pragmatic foreign policy approach. So keeping distance to NATO a little bit, but also wanting to benefit from NATO also in an economic way, because this defense industry cooperation, what does that mean? South Korea has really become a very competitive exporter of military equipment, of arms, of weapons. So actually many European countries, especially Poland, have been buying from South Korean defense companies. You can see that actually South Korea has benefited in that regard also from the war in Ukraine, that in 2022 the exports, weapon exports have been at a really record high, and then 2023 also relatively high. 2024 actually they went down quite a bit, and now there's another chance because NATO member states, they have to spend 5% of their GDP for defense. That means part of it maybe for infrastructure, so indirect spending, but a lot really increasingly towards military spending. And that is a chance for South Korean defense companies. And I think to establish this consultative body will help maybe South Korea to export weapons to NATO members.
Right. And staying with security, Professor Kim, the new South Korean administration has pledged to advance peace through dialogue over peace through strength with regard to tensions here on the Korean Peninsula. How effective do you suppose will this new approach be?
Yeah, peace through dialogue and peace through strength actually all are same, but the different approaches are different pros and cons. Usually, conservative government emphasize peace through strength, and liberal government peace through dialogue. We need to have both one anyway, dialogue and strength for keeping peace. Lee Jae-myung government emphasizing peace itself in guarantee economic development, because without peace, North Korea provocation or instability will lead another disaster for economic situation in Korea, because foreign company will withdraw. So this kind of environment in Korean Peninsula, peace itself is very important, and Moon Jae-in government at the time, that's why emphasize on peace with the North Korea. And keeping peace in another itself an objective. But anyway, this is a very difficult situation now. It's very different from the 2018 Singapore or 2019 Hanoi summit situation. North Korea do not consider South Korea anyway as a partnership, and Trump's second administration now has only 3 years. So maybe Kim Jong-un already have a Russian cooperation. So anyway, this is really very difficult situation, but anyway, Lee Jae-myung government, the slogan "Peace through dialogue" is very important for South Korea, because now the Korean Peninsula face a very strong security challenge from Russian, North Korea cooperation and U.S.-China strategic competition.
Right. And despite those challenges, Fabian, over in the U.S. last week, President Donald Trump claimed, or he reaffirmed that is, his resolve to solve the conflict with North Korea. Could you give us some context behind these comments? And what are the prospects of such a scenario, Mr. Trump meeting with Kim?
Yeah, actually Trump made that comment during a press conference, and he was actually asked something slightly different. The reporter wanted to know whether Trump has already written a letter towards North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. And just for context, during Trump's presidency, both leaders like Kim Jong-un and Trump, they shared extensive letters, and it was kind of a bromance, that's what it was called in the media, and they communicated through those letters. And Trump dodged the question. He didn't want to say whether he has written another letter now to Kim Jong-un or not, but he instead answered saying that he can solve the conflict with North Korea. He has had very good relationship with Kim Jong-un. And to give you context, I would say during his first presidency, yes, he brought a new dynamic to the Korea conflict. conflict. He achieved historic summits with Kim Jong-un, and the first one in Singapore was rather successful, but the second one in Hanoi in Vietnam ended in a disaster, and that also showed the weakness of Trump's approach, because we don't know what happened behind closed doors, but when it got to concrete steps towards denuclearization and negotiating, Trump's strategy seemed rather unsuccessful. The summit basically ended before even lunch was on the agenda. And I'm sure that Kim Jong-un has not forgotten that. I mean, he has lost massive face. He came with his bulletproof train from North Korea to Vietnam, then had to leave without any results. I mean, it was also difficult to market that in front of his population, because it was obvious that this meeting was a failure. And so now I think it will be difficult to reconnect for Trump with Kim Jong-un. And North Korea right now is in a different situation. They are not so much, they don't have much incentives to really re-engage with the US, because now they have support from other countries, mainly from Russia.
Right, indeed, which is something Professor Kim was also saying. Professor Kim, now some claim that the US's recent airstrikes against 3 Iranian nuclear sites will leave North Korea more determined, if you will, to keep its nuclear weapons. Do you share this outlook, Professor Kim?
Yeah, this is anyway will be bad lesson to North Korea, because if Iran has nuclear weapons, Iran, Israel, and U.S. will have different action against Iran. In Libya, it's the same case. So North Korea, Kim Jong-un learned some lesson. I will never give up nuclear weapons. So we need to build a more realistic approach to North Korea for the denuclearization, also negotiation tool, not just saying about CVID, but more realistic approach, like the step-by-step approach or good enough deal, or the threat reduction approach, or step-by-step approach, because freezing first and with some kind of a small sanction release with the snap option. Already Washington expert provide that kind of option in leading some peace through dialogue, and also better inter-Korea relation will be facilitating for this type of the DPRK-U.S. relation. North Korea, Kim Jong-un already in the Hanoi summit provide the same, giving up Yeonbyung facility to Trump, and also they made the Singapore summit and then never declare giving up or stopping Singapore declaration. So there will be more starting point between the Trump and Kim Jong-un. So there is something special starting point between them. And after Iranian situation, maybe Trump will try to maximize the opportunity to restart the negotiation with Trump. And also Putin-Trump dialogue will lead some kind of Kim Jong-un-Trump negotiation via Putin's role as a moderator, just like Moon Jae-in government role at the time as a moderator. So all type of situation and all type of realistic approach will be possible for the next Trump-Kim Jong-un negotiation with a more realistic approach.
Right. And Fabien, as you mentioned, another concern, of course, for the international community is the military cooperation between North Korea and Russia. What's the latest on that front?
Well, there's a lot happening, actually. So North Korea has apparently decided to send another batch of, this time, military construction workers or military engineers to Kursk, the region that was shattered by the war, and to rebuild that region. And that comes, of course, after North Korea has sent already 2 waves of soldiers to help Russia in this war. And yeah, it's quite remarkable. The relationship between Russia and North Korea is really increasing. Now we have basically a situation where every other week a Russian minister is visiting Pyongyang, or vice versa. High-ranking North Korean delegations are visiting Moscow. Recently, when Kim Jong-un was opening up a tourism resort, it was quite obvious that he was also targeting Russian tourists. Actually, right now you have also direct flight connection between Vladivostok and Pyongyang, I believe. And I mean, it is really remarkable, because just a couple of years ago, this relationship would have been unthinkable. I mean, nobody would have expected that Russia would getting so close to North Korea. And now that's the reality. And I think it's continuing continuing. We have cooperation for military, but also for scientific, for education, for culture. Recently, the culture minister by Russia was also visiting Pyongyang. And I think this deep cooperation will last at least until the war in Ukraine is over, because when the war in Ukraine is over, I think North Korea will not be so attractive for Russia anymore.
Right. Professor Kim, meanwhile, back here in South Korea, President Lee Jae-myung's pick for defense minister has been receiving quite a bit of attention. What do you believe are the implications of this nomination?
Yeah, under the circumstance of a martial law situation, because of that impeachment situation, everybody agreed that we need now civilian defense minister. This was not new, actually. During the 1950 and 60, we already had a civilian defense minister, but after the Park Chung-hee and John Dong government, all defense ministers are retired general. But the problem is their generalship or leadership was kind of a behavior like division commander or kind of only military narrow mindset rather than government body leadership who deal with the defense budget or the National Assembly job. So now appointing Congressman Ang Gyu-baek. Ang Gyu-baek was have been 5-term defense committee member and very experienced, and even opposition party the praise his leadership and his personality. So he will be the great civilian defense minister. At the same time, his role is not just being civilian. The Iraq military face a lot of security challenge in a low birth rate. Not many people want to be the military soldier as a job, and many middle level or early level stage of the young soldier want to leave from the military because of difficult the life and balancing. So civilian defense minister have to do a lot of job with the kind of experienced military leader, and also military now is need some motivation to serve, because of martial law situation, everybody blame them, and they have a very low their moral now. So civilian defense minister have to remove their rank military totally, and their rank military leadership will be recovered by civilian defense minister job. So this is a serious challenge, but I believe the civilian defense minister Ang Gyu-baek will be a great leader, and the Joint Chief of Staff will support his leadership as a military professionalism. So Minister of National Defense and Joint Chief of Staff will have to do as the great partnership as civil military relations.
Right. And as Professor Kim, this is an impromptu question. So as the new administration here in South Korea shapes its foreign policy as well as its defense infrastructure with such nominations, do you suppose that speaking of the ROK-US alliance, would you as a scholar claim that the US under the current Trump administration remains a reliable partner for South Korea, keeping in mind our tensions with North Korea?
Yeah, that is a very great question, and one of the most challenging the long military face, because the Trump administration, as everybody know, for a lot of biography of his defense minister, Mark Esper, or other guy, Trump would like to withdraw all USFK, and they stop it. And also now US looks like considering US forces in Japan is more important in defending Taiwan rather than U.S. forces in Korea. So many rumor now is USFK commander rank, military rank from 4-star to 3-star, and U.S. forces in Japan from 3-star to 4-star. So that type of lot of the rumor from the Washington, not from North Korea, Pyongyang. So now we have to build a more ROK-U.S. military partnership via more the combined exercise. At the same time, we have to be one team, especially in solving North Korea problem, because under the Trump first administration, White House and Joint Chief of Staff and Pentagon and State Department all have a different voice and action. So at the time, Moon Jae-in administration has a very difficult situation, because all dialogue with the White House, all dialogue with the Pentagon is very different. So now is the Trump White House control all Pentagon and State Department very efficiently. And Peter Hegseth and Marco Rubio looks like great team with the Trump. So I think this is a great opportunity for the one team as a one channel between ROK U.S. In solving North Korea problem, also in strengthening ROK U.S. partnership as well.
Right, for sure. Professor Kim, thank you so much for taking my impromptu question. And here in the studio, Fabian, thank you very much for your time and your thoughts. All right, well, that brings us to the end of this edition of Press Perspective. As always, thank you for watching, and be sure to join us again same time tomorrow.
How to survive in Korea. One room. So, you're surviving in Korea if you signed a contract